Recently I watched a scene from the German war movie Downfall for the first time. Now, I'd actually seen this scene before. It's a famous meme where people put their own subtitles on it, and this was my first time watching it with the correct translation for the dialogue. It was incredible, a wonderful acting performance, just a wonderful piece of cinema, and I learned from that in the comments the actor who played Hitler was Bruno Ganz, and it was just such a captivating performance. And I wanted to learn more about this actual scene, so this here is explaining it. Is that Downfall scene explained? What is Hitler freaking out about 16 days in Berlin? So of course this will be great to learn more about the movie, about the scene, but I guess just learn a bit more about German history as well. And you can tell me what you think about this. Let's watch.
Here's our historical breakdown of the famous scene from the movie Downfall, because so many of you have commented about it so far. Now remember, Downfall is an artistic interpretation, so not everything about the scene is totally accurate, and it condenses different historical events together and leaves others out. It's late April, and the Red Army is at or already within the city limits of Berlin. We're in the Reichskanzlei bunker in Berlin's Wilhelmstraße, and that means there is less than 40 kilometers between the Red Army and Hitler's headquarters.
Es ist dem Feind gelungen, die Front in breiter Formation zu durchbrechen.
Generalleutnant der Waffen-SS Hermann Fegelein enters the packed planning room. He was the brother-in-law of Hitler's soon-to-be wife Eva Braun and a devoted Nazi.
Im Süden hat der Gegner Zossen genommen und stößt auf Stahnsdorf vor.
On the map, we can see that the Soviets have already surrounded the city on 3 sides. Their armored spearheads are racing to close the ring and cut off any chance of reinforcement from the outside. The last few reinforcements for Berlin are about to arrive from the northwest. They are members of the 33rd Waffengrenadierdivision der SS Charlemagne and are mainly French soldiers fighting for the Germans.
Der Feind operiert jetzt am nördlichen Stadtrand zwischen Frohnau und Pankow, und im Osten ist der Feind bis zur Linie Lichtenberg-Marsdorf-Karlshorst gelangt.
The man explaining the Soviet advance on the map is Generalleutnant Hans Krebs, chief of the Army General Staff. He would play a key role in the fighting to
The
come.
actors look very similar to the real
Steiners wird das
people.
alles in Ordnung kommen.
Hitler responds to the threat by saying that Waffen-SS General Felix Steiner will counterattack, relieve the city, and turn the tide of the war. Hitler is portrayed here as still being in control, giving orders and drawing lines on battle maps. But Steiner's 3rd Germanic SS Panzer Corps and the other understrength units that comprise the Armeegruppe Steiner only properly existed on paper. Communication breakdown, constant retreat, and a lack of equipment and experienced troops make it nearly impossible to maintain contact with the general staff in the bunker.
Mein Führer, Steiner.
Krebs is clearly afraid to deliver the bad news. He's just been on the phone with Steiner and told him to link up with General Wenck's forces. This would allow the 9th Army to break out and form a cohesive defense of the city. But Steiner told Krebs the attack was pointless, and neither he nor Wenck had the forces required to break the Soviet grip on the city.
Steiner konnte nicht genügend Kräfte für einen Angriff massieren.
The man who steps in and explains the situation is Generaloberst Alfred Jodl, Chief of Operations Staff for the Armed Forces High Command and nominally in charge of the defense of the country. He'd been close to Hitler's planning since the very start of the war.
Der Angriff Steiner ist nicht erfolgt.
Hitler's hand is shaking, as it often did towards the end of the war.
I actually never knew that.
Es bleiben im Raum Keitel, Jodl, Krebs und Burgdorf.
He orders everyone to leave the room, except Jodl, Krebs, Keitel, and Burgdorf. Basically, the highest-ranking generals on his staff.
I actually didn't appreciate this was so
But despite
accurate.
Hitler's clear
when I watched
orders,
the scene the first
Josef
time.
Goebbels and Martin Bormann stay behind as well. Goebbels' Ministry for Propaganda was still hard at work, trying to convince the defenders that miracle weapons would soon come to their aid. Goebbels' wife and children were all in the bunker as well. Martin Bormann was a high-ranking Nazi Party member close to Hitler. He was partially in charge of the Volkssturm, a last-ditch militia of old men and young boys that were sent to defend Berlin. But Bormann did not leave the bunker to command them. On the right, we see Feldmarschall Wilhelm Keitel, chief of the Armed Forces High Command. Keitel was a loyal follower of Hitler's. He believed in Hitler's strategic genius and earned his job because of his faith in Nazi ideology and the Führer.
Das war ein Befehl! Der Angriff Steiners war ein Befehl!
Hitler's outburst about Steiner's disobedience shows just how he had centralized the chain of command. But Steiner's weak reinforcements of emergency air force and navy troops, as well as Hitler Youth teenagers, lacked the heavy weapons and experience to stop the Red Army. So Steiner simply sent them back.
Wer sind Sie, dass Sie es wagen, sich meinen Befehl zu widersetzen? So weit ist das also gekommen.
The woman on the right is Traudl Junge, one of Hitler's secretaries. Right up until the end, the bunker was staffed with civilian workers like cooks, secretaries, and others.
Das Militär hat mich belogen! Jeder hat mich belogen, sogar die SS! Die gesamte Generalität ist nichts weiter als ein Haufen niederträchtiger, treuloser Feiglinge!
Hitler's not wrong that he'd been lied to. By the end, even Heinrich Himmler had been in contact with the Western Allies in an attempt to convince them to join the Germans and fight the Soviets. The other SS generals like Steiner knew about this, but Hitler did not. By now, these attempts had failed, and many high-ranking SS men were out to save themselves. On the other hand, some foreign Waffen-SS units were among the last to lay down their arms in the city. Meanwhile, some of the remaining troops around Berlin tried to escape towards the American positions at the Elbe River to the west.
Mein Führer, ich kann nicht zulassen, dass die Soldaten, die für Sie verbringen...
Nicht Feiglinge! Verreiter, Versager!
Mein Führer, was Sie da sagen, ist ungeheuerlich.
The man speaking up for the common German soldiers is General Wilhelm Burgdorf, chief of the Army Personnel Office and chief adjutant to Hitler. Burgdorf remained a Nazi hardliner until the very end, and he committed suicide in the bunker on May 2nd.
Jahrelang hat das Militär meine Aktionen nur behindert!
This is Eva Braun. She would be married to Hitler on April 29th, one day before they both committed suicide in the bunker.
Es hat mir jeden nur gegen Widerstand in den Weg gelegt! Ich hätte gut daran getan, von Jahren alle höheren Offiziere liquidieren zu lassen, wie Stalin!
Hitler is raging about having his generals executed and purging the ranks. At this point, he'd already rid himself of several generals and officers, which further weakened the operational capacity of his remaining forces. But this hardly mattered now anyway, since the fighting in Berlin was a death trap, and Steiner and the other generals in the field knew it. But by now, many German commanders were reacting to the situation as they saw fit. The collapsing communications made for an easy excuse.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, I know it's almost near the end of the video, we'll just watch the rest of it as well, but such a short scene, but the significance of it, but having so much historical accuracy is actually quite brilliant. Tell me if you knew all of these people, if you knew about this part of the history before watching the movie. I feel like watching the movie would actually be very educational for me as well as being entertaining. And this breakdown is unbelievable so far, very concise, and actually I'm learning so much about the war. I'm not going to say I'm hugely knowledgeable about World War II, but this is actually, I'm really learning a lot just from this video. Tell me if you are too.
Von allem Anfang an bin ich so verraten und betrogen worden. Es wurde ein ungeheurer Verrat geübt am deutschen Volke. Aber alle diese Verräter werden bezahlen. Mit ihrem eigenen Blut werden sie bezahlen. Sie werden das saufen in ihrem eigenen Blut.
Hitler reportedly ranted and raved during his last days. He randomly called generals and ordered them to send all their troops to the city, and dreamed that Göring's personal army would come to the rescue. But obviously, there was no chance of any of this.
Aber wenn Sie, meine Herren, glauben, dass ich deswegen Berlin verlasse, irren Sie sich gewaltig. Eher jage ich mir eine Kugel durch den Kopf.
Hitler's fate has been the subject of endless conspiracy theories. It's clear that he decided to stay and commit suicide in Berlin rather than to escape or die fighting. Though some argue he considered these options or that preparations for an evacuation were carried out by his staff.
Tun Sie, was Sie wollen.
This movie scene compresses Hitler's ultimate realization that the war was lost, which in reality was a process that took much longer than a few minutes. On April 28th, the last attempts to relieve the city were considered, but the military situation had been lost long before. Hitler and Eva Braun committed suicide on April 30th, and Berlin was surrendered 2 days later. So, that was our quick historical breakdown of the famous scene from the movie Downfall, which just shows a very limited view of this important battle and leaves out a lot. If you want to get a much better understanding of the Battle of Berlin and the events that happened outside the bunker, help us make 16 Days in Berlin, the ultimate documentary about the battle.
That's just a brilliant breakdown of that scene. Again, like, so much information, and for the movie, all I took from it initially was just how great the acting was, how it really captured the tension and the atmosphere in that bunker very like brilliantly. But to actually get all this extra historical context, it just makes this scene even better, honestly, and makes me really again like want to see that full movie. Although I feel like I just want to know everything about everything in the movie as well. Having my lack of knowledge about that war might mean I can't enjoy it as fully as I can, but I'm sure it's still a masterpiece of cinema. And yeah, even just simple things like how similar the actors look to the real people is brilliant. And yeah, tell me what you think about this documentary that we just watched. Did you learn anything from that? Do you already know all this? And yeah, keep telling me more about the movie itself and this situation. Thanks.